Morning, Trainiacs. We got some bike decisions to make. You go for the OG road bike, the new road bike. No, is it a tri-bike kind of day? What about the entry level Ventum, the Ventum Z? No. We're taking the fat bike out for a ride. Now, a lot of the beginner triathletes out there might be going like, how many bikes do I need? Well, the answer is just one. These are bikes that you accumulate over the course of many, many years. Don't stress about it. And when you're ready to step up to your first tri-bike, we're gonna give you some guidance on which tri-bike you should get, what you should look for, and how you should go about buying your very first tri-bike, because you want to make sure that you don't pay more than you need to. You want to make sure that you're going to buy something that has value for a long time. You want to make sure that your total cost is a really good value. Good bang for the buck. And you're dealing with somebody from Winnipeg. I'm professionally cheap. Dealing with a pro here. We don't get hills like this in triathlon. What do I do with this? Oh! However, you don't see this in triathlon. Just a tad more scenery on the fat bike. Just reviewing that sweet jump footage. That looked way cooler in my mind. I felt like I was so high up in the air, but not. So, Trainiacs, as you get into the sport, a lot of you might be looking at people like me rolling around transition with bikes like this that cost upwards of $15,000 and thinking that this is what you have to do. I assure you, that is very much not the case. And I can show you by my experience that you do not need a super expensive bike to do well in triathlon. And the reason that I know that is because I have done as fast as a 31-minute sprint triathlon 20K bike. I think it was a 1:04 Olympic distance triathlon 40K bike on a fairly tough course. And I did those bike splits with a $600 triathlon bike that I actually got for super cheap because it was in a fire. Literally, it was browned and in a fire. And when I actually qualified for the 2018 Half Ironman World Championships with one of the fastest bike splits in the day at 70.3 Austin, I did that on a bike that I borrowed from the local bike shop. It was an entry-level Cervelo P2 with really basic Shimano 105 components, like a $3,000 bike, nothing too terribly fancy. You can still put out very fast times on a tri-bike that doesn't have to look like this super sexy beast. In fact, in our book, Triathlon Bike Foundations, which has 100% 5-star reviews on Amazon, I outline the start to finish. What's the first thing a triathlete should buy? What's the second thing? What's the third thing? What's the fourth thing? And it is all the way up until the 10th thing into the bike that I recommend that you get a tri-bike. It's way into the life cycle of being a triathlete, because I think that you can do fairly well with whatever bike you have access to. And it's not until you say, all right, you know what? I've done a few triathlons. I'm committed to doing more. I'm going to be doing this for a few seasons, that you really even need to think about buying a tri-bike. So now that you don't have to stress about buying a tri-bike right away, if you're a total beginner, what happens if you have decided, okay, I'm in the sport, I'm going to be in for a little while. What kind of tri-bike is the best bike for a beginner? Well, really, it doesn't matter, but I think that there are 3 main things that you should consider when you're buying your very first tri bike. Number 1, I think that if you are buying a beginner tri bike, and that's anything that's under $4,000, in that case, try to look for something that is used. And the reason that I say this is because bikes are like cars. They depreciate very, very quickly. And specifically in that beginner triathlon bike market, there are a lot of tri bikes that become available. So A, that makes it easier to find a good tri bike that's used, and B, becomes harder if you buy a more high-end tri bike to end up reselling it and making your money back. So what you will end up doing typically is you will have a beginner tri bike, your first tri bike, and then several years later, I guarantee you're going to want to upgrade from that. And if you have a ton of money into it, you're gonna take a big loss. But if you've already bought that bike used and it's still in good shape, maybe just 2 seasons old, you can ride it for a season or 2. And then once you decide that you're going to be even more into the sport for lifetime and you can invest upwards of $5,000 to $15,000 on a bike, at that point, you can potentially sell that bike that you bought used for close to what you bought it for. Now, if you are buying your first tri bike and money isn't an option and you're going over the $4,000 mark, in that case, then it's a luxury purchase and you're not looking to make money or even preserve money. Buy whatever you like. But if you're looking at doing that beginner entry-level tri bike, ideally look for something used. Next, and this is a big thing, with the group set, with the crank arms, with the shifters, look for either Shimano Ultegra, Shimano Dura-Ace, SRAM Force, or SRAM Red. What's gonna happen is if you end up buying those entry-level Shimano 105 or SRAM group sets, when you go to resell that bike, there are going to be a heck of a lot of competitors out there that have the same components, the Shimano 105 and the comparable entry-level SRAM group set. Now, if you have a slightly nicer group set, A, it's going to wear a little bit better, B, it's going to be just a little bit nicer to ride while you have the bike, and C, it's going to set your bike apart from all of the other bikes out there because there are so many beginner bikes out there that are getting resold. If yours has slightly nicer components, it's going to end up holding its value a little bit better. And then the third thing is, if I had to recommend one brand over the other, I love my Ventum. I legitimately think that it is a game-changing bike because of the lack of the down tube, which I'll talk about in another video, and they have the Ventum Z, which is their entry-level tri-bike that still lacks that down tube. But for people who don't have mechanical experience, they need a bike that basically builds in some sort of protection for the whoops factor, the what happens if I get to a race and something bad happens. And in that case, you're going to be a lot safer if you have a more common bike. Now, I will say a lot of the parts and bolts and everything that are on the Ventum bike are so easy to find that you can go to Home Depot and find them, but more specific parts, you'd be better off with one of, we list this in the book here, one of the 10 most common bikes, and what we use for that in this book is the top 10 most common bikes at the Ironman World Championship based on the Kona bike count. And those bikes are Cervelo, Trek, Specialized, Felt, Canyon, Argon 18, Scott, BMC, Quintana Roo, and Giant. If something goes wrong with one of those bikes, and particularly if you have Shimano components as opposed to SRAM, again, I love SRAM, but Shimano components with one of those top 10 bikes, at just about every Ironman event, you're going to have a tent or a booth with a lot of the components and parts that are on those bikes and are on that group set. So if something does go wrong at the race, or even at home and you don't yet have a really good relationship with a local bike shop, odds are much better that they're going to be able to fix it for you fairly quickly. And then beyond that, for your first tri bike, if you're on a budget, stick to those principles and then just buy any bike that you like the look of. The color doesn't matter. The exact real manufacturer, it doesn't really matter. The exact group set, it doesn't really matter. as long as you stick to that, ideally a used bike, ideally a very common bike, ideally Ultegra or Dura-Ace components, you're gonna have a bike that is really, really fast, that is easy to work on, that is easy to repair, that has a big kind of built-in buffer for the oops factor. And you're gonna be able to resell that bike when you do want to buy that dream bike in a few years for very close to what you paid for. And then, all of a sudden, you can get the super bike. So Trainiacs, I hope that that guide helps out. If you want to check out more things that you should buy, go check out Triathlon Bike Foundations at triathlonbikefoundations.com. That's where you can get the ebook, the audio book, or if you want the paperback book, that thing right there, you can get that at all of the Amazons all around the world. Go check it out, go buy a bike. Buying bikes are fun. Later, Trainiacs.